Hi there. I've been thinking. I'm not particularly good in social situations. I'm not particularly good at conversation. Whenever I'm engaged in conversation, I'm always afraid that I'm going to say the wrong thing. And there's always a little part of me that's sitting back and trying to monitor the conversation, monitor what I'm saying. And of course, that's not helpful in a conversation because you're then missing perhaps what the other person is saying. And this fear that I'm going to say the wrong thing is not unjustified, as it's proved to be true on many occasions. Sometimes it's become apparent at the time from someone's reaction, but sometimes it becomes apparent only much later when you realize something you said to someone a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year ago has upset them. So it's fraught with difficulties for me, this whole conversation thing and social interaction thing. Recently, our Prime Minister visited China, and I was reading how he had to be very careful. They all had to be very careful about what they said and how they said it, and the words were chosen extremely carefully. And I can understand the difficulties of that and how sensitive that situation is. But I feel like that in almost every interaction that I have with people, in almost every conversation that I have. I'm constantly on edge, just worrying that I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I'm not just talking here about political correctness, although that's something that's entered into the equation more recently. It's often something quite personal. I don't realise that I've said, but I think it's important to remember that a dialogue is just that. It involves two or more, but let's say two people. Involves a speaker and a listener, and they switch roles. And I think while we can misspeak, we can also mishear. And sometimes the misspeaking is intentional, and sometimes it's unintentional. And sometimes the mishearing is unintentional, and sometimes it's intentional. People hear what they want to hear, or they hear what they expected to hear. Or as the speaker, our words carry connotations for people that we weren't aware of. Language is a very complicated thing. Words can mean one thing to one person and another thing to another person. Words don't just have meanings, they have connotations. But even just the meanings alone can be problematic. Those of you who maybe speak more than one language or are learning a language, for example, will know that it's very difficult to translate between languages. You can't come up with an exact term to represent what's said in one language in another. Languages have a whole range of meanings. The words have a whole range of meanings. Some central, some sort of peripheral, out into a sort of shadow area. And it's particularly apparent, I think, when you're trying to read a translation of poetry. In fact, I will never read a translation of poetry because poetry is not just about the meanings of the words, the connotations. It's all about the rhythm and flow of the words, the sounds of the words. And you can't translate that into another language. You end up with a poem, yes, but a different poem. So, just in day to day language, words are complex things. Just take a simple word, well, I say simple, but they're not simple at all. A simple word like father. Now, for some people, that will conjure up a whole range of really warm and fuzzy feelings, a lot of really good memories. But for another person, it will conjure up a whole lot of negative things. It wasn't a good relationship. So the word, even though technically in a dictionary sense it has the same meaning, it won't have the same meaning for the two people who are speaking. Another word like that, a particularly fraught one, I suppose, is God. Now that just has so many meanings that it's virtually meaningless. And I find that I can't have a conversation with someone about God because there's almost no way that we can understand what each other mean by that term. So conversation is fraught, dialogue is fraught. And there's responsibility on both sides. There's the responsibility to speak carefully and the responsibility to listen carefully. But that also somewhat takes the fun out of it, doesn't it? If you're always having to monitor what you're saying. And it would be nice to think that there are safe situations, safe environments, perhaps, not necessarily, but perhaps within family, perhaps with close friends, where you can actually let go of some of that and relax into a conversation a bit. I know that when I relax into a conversation, and sometimes maybe that's with a glass of wine, which tends to help you do that, then that's a time that's particularly fraught with danger because some of the inhibitions and barriers come down. But let's hope that there is a situation where you and I can actually sit with people. We can comfortably say things. We can even say the wrong thing and know that the person we're talking to will, uh, I guess, love us enough, care for us enough to be able to understand where that's coming from. And that we, as the speaker, may at some stage, if we have offended someone, be able to address that issue openly. But this difficulty, it's something that I struggle with all the time. It's something that makes me want to retreat from social situations because I know how fraught and dangerous those situations can become. I don't know if you feel the same way sometimes or all the time. Maybe add something to the comments if you'd like to. But it's certainly something that I think we should all be considering, we should all be thinking about.